Old Man's Silent Path of Revenge.
Part 1. The Peaceful Valley.
Chapter 1. The Rhythm of Seasons. The old man's world was measured in sunrises, not seconds. His name was Leo, though few used it anymore. To most, he was Grandad or Old Man Miller or simply Sir with a respectful nod. He lived in a worn but sturdy farmhouse of white clapboard and a deep, shaded porch, nestled in a wide, green valley where the mountains hunched like sleeping giants on the horizon. His life was a slow, gentle dance with the land. He rose with the first gray hint of dawn, the silence broken only by the creak of the floorboards and the distant, morning cry of a dove. His joints protested the morning chill, a legacy of years he never spoke about, but the motion of routine warmed them. He would brew strong, black coffee in a chipped enamel pot on the old stove, the smell mingling with the scent of dew-damp earth drifting through the kitchen window. His day unfolded with a predictable, comforting rhythm. There was the small vegetable garden to tend, its rows neat and defiant against the eager weeds. There was wood to split for the coming autumn, the steady thwack of the axe's satisfying percussion in the clear air. He would mend fences, watch the clouds, and in the late afternoons, he would sit on his porch swing, its chain groaning a familiar song, and simply be. The true heart of his world, however, arrived every Friday evening like a joyous thunderclap. First came the sound of the car, a reliable, dusty sedan winding up the gravel drive. Then the doors would fly open, and the quiet valley would explode with life. Grandad, Maya, 7 years old with hair the color of wheat and eyes full of summer sky, would be the first, sprinting toward the porch, her laughter bouncing off the hills. Close behind, slower but with equal determination, came Ben, just 5, clutching a crooked drawing in his small fist. Leo's face, usually a landscape of quiet lines, would break into a smile so wide it made his eyes crinkle almost shut. He'd open his arms, and they would collide with him, a bundle of warm, wriggling energy that smelled of sunshine and childhood. Then came his son, David. A big man, solid like an oak tree, wearing his simple blue police uniform with a humble pride. He had his father's strong jaw, but his eyes were different. Leo's were the color of a winter lake, calm and deep. David's were warm brown, open and trusting. Beside him, always with a gentle hand on his arm or a basket of fresh-baked bread in hers, was Clara. She had a smile that could calm a storm and called Leo Papa, a word that never failed to warm him from the inside. The weekends were a festival of ordinary miracles. Leo showed Ben how to hold a hammer, his large, calloused hands gently guiding the small, earnest ones. He helped Maya name the constellations from the porch, telling her stories of heroes and bears in the sky, never the darker tales he knew. David would help with the heavier chores, their companionable silence speaking volumes. Clara would fill the house with the smells of rosemary, roasting chicken, and apple pie. In these moments, Leo felt a peace so profound it was like a physical warmth in his chest. He had built this. He had left a world of shadows and silence for this world of noise and light and love. The ghosts of his past, the man he had been, the weapon he had been, were just bad dreams forgotten in this bright, waking life. Here, he was not a legend. He was a grandfather who made the world's best pancakes and could whistle through a blade of grass. It was all he had ever wanted. As dusk settled one such Friday, fireflies blinking like earthbound stars, Leo sat with David on the porch. The children were asleep, exhausted from play. Clara was humming inside, washing dishes. "Quiet out here," David said, sipping his lemonade. "Too quiet sometimes, after the noise of the town." Leo grunted, looking out at the darkening fields. "Quiet is good. It means nothing's wrong." David was quiet for a moment. "We got a lead on the Garrett case. Big one. Could be the break we need." Leo felt a cold trickle, like a drop of ice water down his spine, unrelated to the evening breeze. He knew the name. Everyone did. Michael Garrett wasn't just a criminal. He was a corporation of evil. Drugs, guns, people, all were currency to him. He operated from the distant, glittering city, his influence a poison seeping into even the quieter districts. "He's powerful, David," Leo said, his voice low. "The kind of powerful that doesn't fight fair, that doesn't have a line he won't cross." David looked at his father, seeing the unusual intensity in his usually placid eyes. "I know, Dad. But that's why we have to stand up. Someone has to draw the line." Leo wanted to tell him. The words burned in his throat. "Let someone else. You have children. A wife. This peace. I know what men like that do. I was worse than him. But he couldn't. To speak of that past would be to invite it into this house, onto this porch." So he just placed a heavy hand on his son's shoulder, the grip of a man who could split oak but now held with gentle strength. "Just be careful. Your line is right here, with them." David nodded, mistaking the warning for simple parental concern. "Always am." Chapter 2. The Honest Son's Badge. David Miller wore his badge not as a piece of metal, but as a promise. In the small county sheriff's office, he was known as Straight Shooter Miller, literally and figuratively. He believed in the law, not as an abstract concept, but as the skeleton that held society upright. He was compassionate but firm, the kind of officer who would help change a flat tire with the same earnest dedication he'd bring to chasing a suspect. His current obsession was the shadow Michael Garrick cast over the region. Garrick was clever. He insulated himself with layers of lawyers, shell companies, and expendable underlings. But David, with a farmer's patience inherited from his father, had been following a money trail, a string of witness statements, small-time dealers turning up scared but silent. He worked late, the lamp on his desk a pool of light in the dark station. His superior, Captain Reed, a man with weary eyes and coffee stains on his shirt, leaned in his doorway. "Miller, go home. It's Garrick. He's a ghost. You'll burn yourself out." David didn't look up from the file. "He's not a ghost, Cap. He's a man. Men make mistakes. He's using the old Benton warehouse district. I can feel it." Feeling isn't evidence. And even if it was, that's federal territory. We wait, we coordinate. While he moves another shipment. While another kid gets hooked on his product. David's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. The line has to be drawn somewhere. It was the same phrase he'd used with his father. For David, the line was clear, bright, and unwavering. A week later, a break came. A terrified young man, a low-level courier for Garrick's operation, was picked up for an unrelated traffic stop. He saw David's calm, honest face and broke. He wanted protection. He gave them a time, a place, a transaction. That night, the old Benton warehouses. Protocol demanded a multi-agency task force, a planned siege. But the informant was clear. It was a fleeting window. A one-time handoff. By the time the gears of bureaucracy turned, it would be over. David made his choice. He called for backup, but he and his partner, a young deputy named Chris, went in first to contain and observe. They were to wait at the perimeter. The warehouse was a cathedral of decay, smelling of rust, oil, and rat droppings. The only light came from a single dangling bulb over two figures and a suitcase full of sealed packages. One was the nervous courier. The other was a man David recognized from blurred photos, Michael Garrick's right-hand man, a viper called Silas. David's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the direct link. He radioed in a whisper. "I have visual on Silas. Transaction in progress. Awaiting your..." A crate clattered in the darkness. Silas's head snapped up. His hand went to his waist. "Police. Freeze!" David shouted, stepping into the light, his service weapon drawn. Chris emerged beside him, voice trembling slightly. "Hands where we can see them." What happened next was a blur that would be reconstructed in reports and inquiries. Silas didn't freeze. He moved with terrifying speed, shoving the courier towards them and going for his gun. The courier stumbled, screaming. A shot rang out, not from David or Chris, but from the deep shadows of the warehouse. Chris cried out, clutching his leg. Then Silas's gun flashed. David didn't remember firing. His training, his instinct, took over. 2 shots. Center mass. Silas jerked backward, collapsing against the suitcase, scattering the packages like poisonous snow. Silence, broken only by the courier's sobs and Chris's pained groans. David approached, weapon still trained, his ears ringing. Silas was gone, his unseeing eyes staring at the corroded ceiling. Backup flooded and then, lights and noise and chaos. David stood over the body, his breath coming in short gasps. He had drawn his line. He had held it. The news called it a shootout. A brave officer-involved incident. The department called it a clean, justified use of force. The internal review would clear him. He had saved his partner, stopped a major deal. At the farm, Leo listened to David's shaky retelling that weekend. David was pale, grappling with the weight of taking a life, even a vile one. Leo listened in silence, his winter-lake eyes unreadable. He poured his son a strong shot of whiskey, his own hand perfectly steady. "You did your job," Leo said, his voice a low rumble. "He chose his path. You chose yours." "It doesn't feel like a choice, Dad. It just happened." "I know," Leo said, and there was a universe of meaning in those two words that David, in his turmoil, missed entirely. "But listen to me. This isn't over. Men like Garrick, they don't see justice. They see insult. They see a score to settle. You have to be more careful now than ever." David nodded, thinking his father meant secure the house, check in more often. He didn't understand that Leo was speaking a fundamental language of the underworld, a language of blood debts and relentless vengeance. Chapter 3: Shadows at the Edge of the Field. A change came over the valley. It was subtle, like the first faint yellowing of a green leaf. The peace remained, but it felt watched. Leo noticed it first. A strange car, dark and expensive, moving too slowly on the distant county road that bordered his land. It was there one afternoon, gone the next, then back again 2 days later. No one got out. It just sat, a silent black insect under the sun. Then, a man in a suit, too crisp for the countryside. He came to the door, asking with a bland smile if this was the Miller residence, claiming to be from a rural census bureau. His eyes, however, didn't look at the peeling paint or the porch swing. They scanned, they measured, they noted. Leo answered with the gruff, simple manner of an old farmer, but he watched the man leave, memorizing the exact shade of his tie, the slight drag in his left foot. The phone calls started for David. Hang-ups at the station. Wrong numbers to the house asking for someone who didn't exist. Clara mentioned a woman taking pictures of a children's school from a parked car. When David inquired, the car was gone. The pressure was a silent, slowly tightening vice. David became more vigilant, his service weapon cleaned and checked with a new frequency. He installed a new security light at their home in town. He talked about getting a dog. Leo, meanwhile, began his own quiet preparations. He didn't buy alarms or guns. He took long, slow walks along the edges of his property. To anyone watching, he was just an old man checking his fences or foraging for wild berries. But on these walks he was mapping. He noted where the tree cover was thickest, where the creek bed provided silent passage, where the old hunting blind overlooked the farmhouse. He began leaving certain tools in specific, hidden places, a sharp, short-handled hatchet wrapped in oilcloth under a particular rock, a coil of wire in the hollow of the old oak, a heavy, smooth river stone deposited in the crook of the fence post. He also started visiting the attic. It was a dusty, forgotten space full of trunks and memories. Clara thought he was reminiscing. In a way, he was. In a locked footlocker, under a stack of old quilts and David's childhood drawings, were other memories. There was no gun, no knife. Instead, there was a set of fine, carbon steel woodworking chisels, their edges honed to a molecular sharpness. There was a roll of silk thread, incredibly strong. There was a leather pouch containing vials of fine powders made from crushed, dried plants that didn't grow in this valley. There was a simple, wooden flute, oddly carved. These were not weapons, they were extensions of a philosophy, the tools of a man who believed the true art was in making death look like nature, like accident, like nothing at all. He didn't remove them. He just looked at them. Touching the cool steel of a chisel was like touching a part of his own skeleton, long buried. It filled him not with excitement, but with a cold, heavy dread. He prayed he would never need to remember what these tools were for. One evening, the black car appeared again, this time at the end of the driveway as dusk fell. It didn't turn in. It just idled. Leo was on the porch. He didn't go inside. He simply stood up from his swing, walked to the edge of the porch, and stood perfectly still, looking directly at the distant vehicle. He didn't glare. He didn't gesture. He just observed. He let the stillness of the land, the gathering darkness, and his own unwavering presence become a statement. After a full minute, the car's lights flicked on, and it slid away into the gloom. David came out. "Was that someone?" "Just lost," Leo said, his eyes still on the empty road. They found their way. But the shadow remained. It was in Clara's slightly too bright smile, in the way Maya now asked if the doors were locked at night, in the way Ben clung a little tighter to Leo's leg. The peaceful valley was holding its breath. Chapter 4. The Encounter That Echoed. The storm broke on a Tuesday. An ordinary, bland weekday. David was off duty. Clara had taken the children to the town library for a summer reading program. They were to meet David for a late lunch at their favorite diner, the Skyline, at 1 p.m. Leo was at the farm, repairing a leak in the horse trough. The sun was high, the air humming with cicadas. A perfect, sleepy summer day. At 12:47 p.m., a force of chaos descended upon the quiet town of Oakhaven. It was not a subtle attack. It was a statement, a demolition. Two large, modified SUVs, windows blacked out, roared down Main Street. They didn't stop for lights. They screeched to a halt directly in front of the Skyline Diner, blocking the street. Men in black tactical gear, wearing balaclavas, erupted from the vehicles. They were not police. Their movements were brutal, efficient, and shockingly fast. David was inside, sitting in a booth by the window looking at a menu. He saw them coming. His police mind processed it in an instant. The threat, the intent. He went for the holster at his ankle, his off-duty weapon. He never cleared leather. The diner's front window exploded inward in a shower of glass. The first man threw fired not bullets, but a deafening, concussive blast from a shotgun. People screamed, ducked, dove under tables. "Miller!" A distorted voice bellowed. David stood up, hands raised, trying to draw fire away from the civilians.
"Here."
"Don't shoot." "Here." It made no difference. Two of the men grabbed him, brutally efficient. They dragged him, struggling, towards the door.
This was not an arrest.
It was an extraction. Outside, chaos reigned. A third vehicle, a sedan, screeched around the corner. Inside were Clara, Maya, and Ben, just arriving, early for lunch. Clara's eyes met David's through the shattered window, wide with terror, with understanding.
"No."
"Go." David screamed, his voice raw. One of the masked men saw the car, saw the family. He didn't hesitate. He raised his assault rifle. Time seemed to fracture. From down the street, a single, precise gunshot rang out. The masked man with the rifle jerked and fell. A county deputy, alerted by the noise, had taken a brave, desperate shot. But it was a spark in a powder keg. The other attackers opened fire. Not at the deputy, but at the sedan. The windshield dissolved into a spiderweb of cracks and red mist. The sound was inhuman, a ripping roar that drowned out all screams. David, witnessing the unimaginable, found a superhuman strength. He broke free from one captor, driving an elbow into his throat. He grabbed for a fallen weapon. A final, close-range blast from a shotgun lifted him off his feet and threw him back through the diner's doorway. Then, as suddenly as they had come, the men retreated. They piled into the SUVs, leaving their fallen comrade, and vanished, leaving behind a silence more terrible than any noise. It was filled with the moans of the wounded, the wail of car alarms, the slow drip of blood on asphalt, and the distant, approaching scream of sirens. At the farm, 15 miles away, Leo was wiping his hands on a rag when the landline rang. It was Captain Reed. His voice was broken, a shattered thing. Leo, you need to come to town.
Now.
There's been an incident. At the diner. It's David. It's all of them. Leo didn't ask questions. He didn't speak. He dropped the rag. He walked out of his barn, got into his old pickup truck and drove. He drove with a terrifying calmness. His hands were steady on the wheel. His face was a mask of stone. But behind his Winterlake eyes, the world was ending. The peaceful valley, the rhythm of seasons, the laughter on the porch, it was all being consumed by a fire he had always feared, a fire he thought he had left behind in another life. He arrived to a scene of nightmare. Police tape, flashing lights, crowds held back. The diner was a gutted shell. The sedan, he wouldn't look at the sedan. Captain Reed, his face gray, intercepted him, tried to lead him away. Leo, I'm so sorry, we think it was Garrick. Revenge for Silas. It was a massacre. David, Clara, they're gone. I'm so sorry. Leo stood in the middle of the frantic street, untouched by the jostling of deputies and paramedics. The children, Leo said, his voice flat, empty of all emotion. Reed's face crumpled further. The car, we think they were in the car. We're still identifying, it's bad, Leo. But as the words left Reed's mouth, a young, tearful paramedic rushed up. Captain, the kids, the boy and girl from the car, they're not in the vehicle. We can't find them. They weren't inside. A tiny, impossible fissure opened in the void that was now Leo's soul. Not in the vehicle. Gone could mean many things.
Taken.
Or escaped. In that moment, something ancient and cold, something buried for over 2 decades, stirred. It uncoiled from the depths of his being. The grief, a tidal wave of agony that threatened to shatter his very bones, met this cold thing. They did not cancel each other out. They fused. The old man, Leo Miller, the grandfather, the farmer, receded. Not gone, but enveloped. And what stepped forward onto that blood-stained street was someone else. Someone the world had forgotten. Someone for whom lines were not drawn in the sand, but etched in the fabric of fate. He turned his empty eyes from the carnage and looked towards the distant mountains, where Garrick Empire was rumored to be. The path of his peaceful life had ended abruptly in a ditch of blood and fire. Now a different path began. It was not a path of justice, for the law had just died with his son. It was a path of reckoning, a path of silence. He walked back to his truck, leaving the chaos behind. He had a farm to close up. And then he had to find his grandchildren. And then he had to visit upon Michael Garrick and everyone who served him a truth they had forgotten, that the most dangerous creature in the world is not a violent man, but a gentle one who has been shown there is no more peace. And this particular gentle man knew more ways to end a life than even the devil could imagine. Part 2. The Harvest of Blood. Chapter 5. The Day the Sun Didn't Rise. The world did not turn gray. It turned still. For Leo, the days that followed were not days at all, but a single, elongated moment of silent, howling void. He moved through the rituals of aftermath like a ghost haunting his own life. The police, David's friends, his brothers in blue, handled him with gloves of unbearable pity. They drove him to the morgue for identifications he did not remember. They spoke in soft voices about closure and investigation. Captain Reed, his own face ravaged, tried to explain the ongoing manhunt for Garrick's men, the federal task forces, the promises of justice. Leo heard it as one hears distant thunder. It meant nothing. The law's justice was a slow, clumsy beast, bound by rules and wires. It could not touch the heart of what had happened. It could not unbreak what was broken. The funeral was a blur of black suits and tear-streaked faces under a sun that felt insultingly bright. 2 caskets. One large, one smaller. They were closed. The town of Oakhaven poured out its grief, surrounding Leo, a sea of sorrow he could not navigate. He stood by the graves, a stoic statue, his hand resting on each polished wood surface.
He did not weep.
His tears had frozen somewhere deep inside, forming a core of glacial intensity. After the last mourner left, After the dirt was piled high and the flowers laid, Captain Reed found him still standing there in the twilight. "Leo," Reed said, his voice hoarse. "We have a safe house. You can't go back to the farm. They targeted David's whole family. You're not safe." Leo finally turned his head. His eyes, in the fading light, were not the eyes of a broken old man. They were flat, reflective surfaces, like chips of obsidian. "Safe," he repeated, the word tasting of ash. "We'll get them, Leo. I swear to God, we will." "Where are the children?" Leo asked, his voice low and clear, cutting through Reed's assurances. Reed flinched. We have no confirmation." The scene was chaos. There was blood in the car, but no small bodies. It's possible they were taken for leverage, or he couldn't finish the thought. Or they might have run. "We have alerts statewide. Every hospital, shelter, police force is looking." "Garrick took them," Leo stated, a simple, terrible fact. "We don't know that. We have no proof." "I know." There was a finality in his tone that left no room for argument. He looked back at the graves. "I will go back to the farm to get some things." "Leo, it's not secure." "It is my home," Leo said, and the words carried a weight that silenced the captain. This was not a request. It was a declaration. Reed assigned 2 young deputies to escort him, to watch the house. A protective detail. Leo did not object. He rode in silence in the back of the patrol car, watching his beloved valley pass by, now a landscape painted in the colors of loss. The farmhouse, when they arrived, was a tomb of happiness. Maya's crayon drawing still stuck to the refrigerator with a strawberry magnet. Ben's tiny mud boots lay by the door. The porch swing moved gently in the evening breeze. Empty. The deputies, somber and awkward, took positions, one in a cruiser at the head of the driveway, one walking a perimeter. "Take your time, Mr. Miller," the one inside said. "We'll be right here." Leo nodded. He went upstairs, not to his bedroom, but to the attic. The pull-down ladder groaned under his weight. The air was hot and thick with dust. He went directly to the locked footlocker. He did not search for the key. He placed his hands on either side of the old brass lock, took a breath that was not a sigh, but a centering of force, and gave a sharp, precise twist. The metal hasp sheared cleanly off with a dull snap. The sound was the first true sound in his world since the gunfire. He lifted the lid. The quilts, the drawings. He set them aside with a tenderness that was heartbreaking. Beneath them lay the past. He lifted out the roll of silk thread, the leather pouch, the wooden flute. Finally, his hands closed around the set of woodworking chisels. He drew one from its leather sleeve. The carbon steel was cool, the edge so fine it seemed to drink the dim light from the attic window. He looked at his reflection in the polished blade, an old, weary face, etched with new, deep lines of grief, and eyes that were now utterly, terrifyingly calm. He was not Leo Miller looking at a tool. He was the tool remembering the hand that wielded it. He repacked the items not into the trunk, but into a simple, worn canvas satchel, the kind an old craftsman might carry. He added a few other things from the attic, a spool of copper wire, a jar of rendered fat from the larder downstairs, a handful of specific herbs from his garden that were not for cooking. Downstairs, he walked past the watching deputy, who was peering out the kitchen window. "Find everything, sir?" "Yes," Leo said. "I will be in the barn."
"Do not follow me."
The deputy, startled by the absolute authority in the old man's voice, simply nodded. The barn smelled of hay, oil, and animals long gone. In a hidden compartment under the workbench, a space he had built decades ago for a different, darker purpose, he found 2 more items. A small, nondescript lockbox. Inside was a stack of passports from different countries, each with his photograph but different names, each year's expired. And money. A lot of money. Old bills untraceable. Emergency currency from a life he'd buried. Next to it, wrapped in an oily rag, was a weapon. But it was not a gun. It was a tanto, a short, single-edged Japanese blade, its handle wrapped in dark cord. It was a tool for close, intimate work. He had taken it from a man in Kyoto a lifetime ago. He slid it into the satchel. He changed his clothes. Off came the flannel shirt and denim overalls. On went dark, durable trousers, a black wool sweater, and a heavy, waxed canvas jacket. He laced up a pair of boots that were worn but supple, silent on any surface. He looked like a farmer going out for a night check, but the transformation was complete. The grandfather was now a lair, a camouflage worn by something else. He exited the barn not through the main door, but through a small, rear hatch used for feeding livestock in winter. It was out of sight of both deputies. He melted into the tree-line at the back of the property, a shadow among shadows. He moved without sound, his gait no longer the slightly stiff walk of an old man, but a fluid, balanced glide. The land, his land, welcomed him, hiding his passage. He circled wide, coming up behind the patrol car at the head of the driveway. The young deputy inside was sipping coffee, watching the house. Leo observed him for a full minute. This boy was trying to protect him. He was one of David's. He was good. Leo stepped out of the shadows, tapping lightly on the passenger window. The deputy jumped, fumbled for his sidearm, then saw it was the old man. He rolled the window down, confused. "Mr. Miller? What are you?" "You are a good boy," Leo said, his voice low. "Do not go into the house. Wait for Captain Reed. Tell him the old man is gone to find his grandchildren. Tell him to call off the search. Tell him the law will not find what is lost now." "Mr. Miller, you can't." But Leo was already turning away, fading back into the darkness. "Wait, sir." "Leo." The deputy scrambled out of the car, but the night was silent and still. The old man had vanished, as if he had never been. All that remained was the empty farmhouse, the whispering trees, and a deep, primal chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Chapter 6. Ashes and an Old Box. Captain Reed stood in Leo's empty kitchen, feeling a fool. The two chastised deputies had relayed the old man's message. Gone to find his grandchildren. It was the rambling of profound grief, a dangerous, suicidal impulse. "He's a 70-year-old farmer, for God's sake." Reed barked, running a hand over his face. "He's in shock. He could be anywhere, hurt, confused." He ordered an immediate search of the property and the surrounding woods, a missing persons alert for Leo himself. They found nothing. No sign of struggle, no trail. It was as if the earth had swallowed him. In the attic, Reed found the forced footlocker. The quilts and childhood drawings were stacked neatly to the side. The trunk itself was empty, save for a single, small object at the very bottom. Reed picked it up. It was a faded, embroidered patch. It depicted a stylized, closed eye with a single teardrop. Beneath it were the words, "Nemesis nunc dormio." "Now I sleep." It meant nothing to him. He bagged it as evidence, assuming it was some old military insignia from a unit he didn't recognize. He had the house sealed. A part of him hoped Leo would wander back, broken and lost. The larger, more professional part knew the old man was likely dead, consumed by the same tragedy that took his son. Meanwhile, the official investigation into the massacre was hitting walls. Garrick was insulated. He had been in his penthouse apartment in the city, hosting a charity luncheon, a dozen credible witnesses placing him there. The vehicles used were stolen and found burned out in a remote quarry. The weapons were untraceable. The sole dead attacker had no fingerprints on file, no dental records that matched. He was a ghost. The story became a national tragedy for a week, the honest small-town cop and his family slain by ruthless drug lords. Then the news cycle moved on. For the world, the Millers became another sad statistic in the war on crime. For the man known as Garrick, it was a satisfactorily closed ledger. The insult of his lieutenant's death had been answered in blood, publicly and brutally. The message was sent. The account was settled. He gave no more thought to the dead policeman's family. The old man was irrelevant. The children, they were a loose end his men were to tidy up. He didn't ask for details. He didn't want to know. But in the shadows of the city, a different kind of search had begun. Leo did not go to the city first. He went to the source. He traveled not by car or bus, but by a series of freight trains and long, nocturnal walks. He lived off the land, snaring rabbits, purifying water. He was a phantom moving through the country's underbelly. His destination was a place not on any map, a cabin deep in the national forest beyond the mountains. He had bought it 40 years ago under a false name, a retreat for a man who could have no real home. He had not been there in 25 years. It was nearly fallen in, covered in moss and pine needles. But the stone chimney stood firm. Inside, under the hearthstone, he found another lockbox, sealed in plastic and time. This one did not hold money or passports. It held his true identity. There were files. Paper files from a pre-digital age. Photographs. Dossiers. A list of names, dates, methods. A record of the ghost who had been called Naraka. It was not a boastful trophy case. It was a meticulous logbook of a craftsman. He paged through it, the memories flooding back not as emotions but as data, environments, security layouts, patterns of behavior. He found the tools of his prime. A set of needles thinner than human hair, housed in a jade case. A wristwatch whose internal mechanism could be reconfigured into a lockpick or a syringe. A length of garrote made of a memory metal alloy that could be shaped and would snap back to form with body heat. But more importantly, he accessed a network he had hoped never to use again. In a rusted metal box buried outside was a satellite phone, ancient but with a nuclear-powered battery. It had one number programmed into it. He powered it on. It took a day to acquire a signal. He dialed. It rang 5 times before a voice answered, deep and weathered. This line was meant to be dead. It was Leo said. Naraka calls. A long, heavy silence. Then a low whistle. God in heaven. The eye that sleeps. They said you were dead. Or retired. I was. I am neither now. I need information. Information is expensive. Your currency is outdated. I have other currency. A name. A target. Michael Garrick. And his entire operation. I want everything. Structure, locations, habits, weaknesses. And I want to know about 2 children. A boy and a girl. Taken from Oakhaven. The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment. Garrick is a savage. A bull in a china shop. But a very rich, well-protected bull. He has made many enemies. His information is available. For a price. The children, that is harder. Rumors only. A prize like that, if they live, would be kept close or sold far. I will see what whispers are in the wind. What is your timescale? Immediate. Then the price doubles. And I want Garrick's personal security protocols as my bonus when you are done. Agreed. You are old, my friend. The world has eyes now it did not have before. Cameras. Algorithms. The old ways still work, Leo said, his voice like stone. If you remember them. And I remember everything. He spent 3 days at the cabin. He practiced. He stretched muscles long unused, ran through kata of movement and balance, refamiliarized himself with the weight and balance of his tools. He was not as fast as he once was, but he was smarter. And he was fueled by a purpose more potent than any contract, a father's love, transmuted into a perfect, crystalline hate. The information began to arrive in coded data bursts to the sat phone. Blueprints of Garrick's downtown fortress, his country estate. Schedules of his movements, his habits, the weekly massage, the meetings at a specific downtown club. The hierarchy. Silas was dead, but there was a new enforcer, a man called Victor Krauss, ex-Special Forces, brutally efficient. There were accountants, lawyers, lieutenants. And there was a whisper, unconfirmed, about the children. After the hit, there was chaos. 2 of Garrick's lower-level men were tasked with disposal. But they never reported back. They vanished. With them, possibly the children. They might have seen an opportunity, a valuable commodity to sell on their own. Or they might have hidden them, fearing Garrick's wrath for some failure. The trail went cold in a grimy neighborhood known as the Docks, a lawless zone even the police avoided. It was a thread, the faintest shimmer of hope in the abyss. It was all he needed. On the fourth morning, Leo carefully resealed the cabin, burying its secrets once more. He packed his satchel, now containing both ancient tools and modern printouts. He looked at the tranquil, silent forest. This was the last place of peace he would know. He turned and began to walk towards the highway. He would hitch a ride with a long-haul trucker. He would be a silent, harmless old man going to visit a relative in the city. No one would notice him. Naraka was awake, and he was coming for the man who had killed his son. The harvest of blood would begin not with a bang, but with the first, silent cut of the scythe. Chapter 7. The Name Behind the Mask, Naraka. The city was a shock of noise, light, and stench. It was a living organism, pulsing with indifference. Leo absorbed it like a sponge, his senses, long attuned to the whispers of the valley, now parsing a new symphony of threats and opportunities. He went to the docks first. The information was old, the trail cold. But cold trails were his specialty. He did not ask questions. He observed. He became a piece of the scenery, a homeless vet, a lost old man, a shadow in a doorway. He frequented a soup kitchen near where the two missing low-level thugs, named Crank and Wiley, were last seen. He listened to the muttered conversations of the desperate and the addicted. He traded a few dollars for information, not about children, but about the two men. He learned they were small-time, greedy, and scared of their boss, Victor Krauss. They had bragged about a big score unrelated to drugs, about getting out, just before they disappeared. Then a break. A woman with a haunted face and track marks on her arms, receiving a bowl of stew, mumbled to her friend, "Still dream about those kids' eyes. In that hellhole of cranks. Like little ghosts." Leo's heart, a frozen engine, gave a single, hard thump. He waited. He followed her when she left, not overtly, but with a patient, relentless tail that would have been impossible to detect. She led him to a condemned tenement building, its windows boarded, its front door hanging by one hinge. He did not enter that night. He watched. He saw squatters, dealers, users. No children. But the woman had not been inside. She had looked at the building with fear and hurried past. The next day, he returned in the guise of a city housing inspector, complete with a hard hat and a clipboard bought from a thrift store. He moved through the filthy, dangerous building with an air of bored authority that was its own protection. He found Crank and Wiley's former nest on the third floor, a room reeking of mold, cheap alcohol, and despair. He searched with a forensic eye, invisible to the doped-up occupants of other rooms. Under a loose floorboard, warped by damp, he found it. Not a clue to the children's whereabouts, but something else. A small, plastic action figure, Ben's favorite superhero, and a hair tie with a little plastic daisy on it, of the kind Maya wore. They had been here. Recently. The thugs had taken them, perhaps to hide them, perhaps to sell them. But something had gone wrong. The men were gone. The children were not here now. But the find was a spark in the darkness. They had been alive after the attack. They might still be. The hunt for Garrick's men, however, could not wait. Finding the children in this urban labyrinth would take time. He would need to thin the herd, to shake the tree, to make the enemy fearful and prone to mistakes. And he needed to send a message. He chose his first target not from the top, but from the middle. An accountant named Alan Finch. A meek, balding man who never got his hands dirty, but who kept the books that let the blood money flow. Finch was the lubricant of the machine. Without him, things would grind. He lived in a quiet suburb, had a wife, 2 cats, and a fondness for single malt scotch, which he drank every night on his patio at exactly 9:15 p.m. Leo watched him for 2 nights. The house had a basic alarm system. The neighborhood had nosy neighbors. Finch himself was a creature of habit. On the 3rd night, a gentle rain began to fall. Leo, dressed in dark, water-resistant clothing, approached not through the front or back, but through the narrow, overgrown gully between Finch's property and the next. He was a patch of deeper shadow in the wet gloom. Finch was on his patio, under the awning, as predicted. A glass of amber liquid glowed in the soft light from the living room window. He was checking his phone, frowning. Leo had already disabled the external motion sensor with a carefully aimed blob of conductive gel that shorted its circuit, making it appear as if the rain had caused a fault.
He watched.
He waited. Finch finished his drink, sighed, and stood up. He slid the patio door open and stepped inside, leaving it slightly ajar for the cats. This was the moment. Leo moved. In 10 silent seconds, he crossed the wet lawn, slipped through the patio door, and was inside the house. He stood in the dark living room listening. He could hear Finch in the kitchen, rinsing his glass. The wife was upstairs, watching television. Leo moved to Finch's study. On the desk was a laptop, the keys of evil. He did not touch it. Instead, he took from his satchel a small vial from the leather pouch, a fine, bluish powder. He sprinkled a minuscule amount into the humidifier that Finch, who suffered from sinus issues, kept on his desk. The powder was a complex neurotoxin derived from a rare frog and certain mushrooms, refined to be activated by heat and moisture. When Finch turned on his humidifier the next morning while working, the mist would carry the toxin. The effect would be a massive, sudden stroke. Untraceable, fatal, and utterly mundane for a man of Finch's stress and age. But Leo was not done. He was here to send a message, not just to kill. He took Finch's favorite pen from the desk, a gold-plated fountain pen. With a tool from his kit, he expertly disassembled it. Inside the ink cartridge, he placed a tiny, rolled piece of paper. On it, he had drawn, in meticulous detail, a single symbol, a closed eye with a teardrop. He reassembled the pen and placed it back exactly as he found it. He exited the house the way he came, vanishing back into the rain and the gully. The next afternoon, Alan Finch was found dead at his desk by his wife. The initial assumption was a cerebral aneurysm. A tragedy. Only when the coroner's report came days later would the unusual neurochemical markers be found, raising quiet questions. And only when the police, going through his effects, examined the pen, which the wife wanted to keep, would they find, to their confusion, the strange little scroll with its weeping eye. It would mean nothing to them. It would be filed away. But when a photo of that scroll eventually reached Victor Krauss, via a detective on Garrick's payroll, the reaction would be different. Krauss, who had a broader, darker education than most, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He had heard stories. Old, whispered campfire tales from the world of professional wetwork. About a ghost. A myth. Naraka. The hell from which none return. The eye that sleeps. It was supposed to be a legend. A boogeyman. Krauss looked at the photo, then at the report of Finch's inexplicable death. Coincidence had to be ruled out.
He went to see Garrick.
Chapter 8. The First Whisper of Vengeance. Garrick's penthouse was a monument to wealth without taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a breathtaking view of the city lights, which only served to highlight the garish gold fixtures and oversized, white leather furniture inside. Garrick himself, a man in his 50s with a carefully maintained physique and cold, empty eyes, was sipping an expensive vodka. Neat. A stroke, Victor, Garrick said dismissively as Krauss laid out his concerns. The man ate like a pig and lived on stress. It happens. This drawing is some kid's doodle he picked up. It's not a doodle, sir, Krauss insisted, his military posture rigid. It's a specific sigil. From a different time. A calling card for an operator who hasn't been active since before you were in diapers. If it's him. If it's a fairy tale, you mean, Garrick scoffed. We took out a cop. A hick. We answered the insult. It's over. The old man is probably dead in a ditch. The kids are someone else's problem now. Focus on the new shipment coming in from the coast. With respect, Krauss pressed, a rare line for him to cross, we should increase your personal security.
Just for a while.
And we should look harder for those children. If someone is using that symbol and they're connected to Miller, the children are the key. Either as leverage or as a motive. Garrick's eyes narrowed. He did not like being challenged, but he paid Krauss to be paranoid, so he didn't have to be.
Fine.
Double the detail at this state. Do a sweep. And find those damn kids. If they're alive, I want them silenced.
Permanently. But discreetly.
No more spectacles. As Kraus turned to leave, Garrick added, his voice dripping with contempt. And Victor, don't bring me ghost stories again. But the ghost was already moving. Leo's next target was chosen for visibility. A lieutenant named Marco, who ran Garrick's nightclub, The Vault. Marco was a showman, a braggart, who loved to be seen surrounded by bodyguards and beautiful women. He felt safe in crowds. Leo observed the vault. He noted the security cameras, the bouncers, the alleyways. He noted Marco's routine. He arrived at 10 p.m., held court in a roped-off booth, and left at 3 a.m., often drunk, to be driven home. One night, as Marco's black SUV pulled into the alley behind the club for his arrival, a city sanitation truck was conveniently blocking part of the narrow passage. It was a routine pickup, the workers indifferent. Marco's driver honked impatiently. Leo, dressed in a reflective sanitation vest and cap, nodded apologetically from beside the truck. He shuffled forward with a wheeled bin, seemingly to clear the way. As he passed the idling SUV's front passenger side, where Marco sat in the back behind tinted glass, he stumbled slightly. His gloved hand touched the car's rear quarter panel for balance. Embedded in the palm of his glove was a powerful, rare earth magnet. And attached to that magnet was a small, handmade device. It was a sticky GPS tracker, but modified. Alongside the tracking circuitry was a tiny, sealed ampoule of a fast-acting, contact-based coagulant, and a microsyringe needle. When Marco arrived at his luxury apartment building an hour later, the valet opened his door. As Marco stepped out, the change in the vehicle's angle triggered the device. The microneedle pricked the car's frame, injecting the coagulant into the small, pressurized canister of the SUV's air suspension system on that rear corner. The next afternoon, as Marco's driver took the SUV for a wash, the coagulant had done its work, solidifying within the suspension line. On a sharp turn on the freeway later that night, the compromised line burst under pressure. The SUV's rear corner dropped suddenly, causing the driver to lose control. The vehicle spun, clipped a barrier, and rolled. Marco and his driver were rushed to the hospital. The driver had a broken arm. Marco, who had not been wearing a seatbelt in the back, was in a coma with severe head trauma. He would never wake up. The accident made the local news. A tragic accident for a known nightlife figure. In the wreckage, firefighters found something odd melted into the plastic of a broken interior panel. It was a small, twisted piece of metal, most of its shape destroyed by the crash and subsequent fluids. But one of the investigators, turning it over, saw a faint, etched marking. Part of a curve. Part of what might have been a tear. Victor Kraus saw the news report. He obtained the photo of the metal fragment. He compared it to the drawing from Finch's pen. His blood ran cold. One could be coincidence.
Two was a pattern.
He went to Garrick's country estate, where the man was now residing behind doubled guards. He didn't mention ghost stories. He presented facts. Finch, dead from an undetectable poison. A symbol found on him. Marco, dead in a suspicious, precise mechanical failure. A similar symbol found in the wreckage. The symbol is a known identifier for a high-tier assassin believed retired or dead. His alias is Naraka. His motif is accidents, natural causes. He is making a point. He is coming for us. And he started with the lawyer and the loudmouth. He's working his way in. Garrick paced his lavish study, finally feeling the first tendril of fear. Not of the law, but of the unseen. Who is he? Who hired him? I don't know who he is. No one does. But I know why he's here. Kraus met his employer's gaze. Miller, the cop. This is revenge. This Naraka is for Miller. That's impossible. Garrick spat. He was a farmer. Was he? Kraus asked quietly. We never looked. We never cared. We killed his son. Now, something has come out of the past to kill us. And it doesn't use guns. It uses the world itself. Garrick sat down heavily, the first crack appearing in his arrogant facade. Find him. Use every resource. I don't care what it costs. Find this ghost and put a bullet in whatever form he's taken. He won't be found by conventional means, Krauss said. But he's looking for something. The children. That's the link. That's the bait. We need to find them first. We use them to draw him out. Then we destroy him with overwhelming force. For the first time, the hunter was becoming hunted. But in the silent streets, in the rain and the dark, the old man was already selecting his next target. The whisper of vengeance had become a clear, cold wind blowing through Garrick's empire. And the wind was just beginning to rise. Part 3. The Waking Legend. Chapter 9. Tools of a Forgotten Trade. The city's underbelly had a rhythm, a pulse of avarice and fear. Leo, now a shadow moving to that beat, no longer fought it. He synchronized with it. He was no longer a visitor from the peaceful valley. He was a predator returned to its native habitat. His base of operations was a single room in a decaying boarding house in a neighborhood forgotten by time. It was paid for in cash, weeks in advance. The landlord asked no questions. The room contained a cot, a chair, a small table, and his satchel. That was all. Here he was nobody. A faint smudge on the windowpane. He spent his days in public libraries, scanning digital archives of old newspapers on microfiche, the glow of the screen reflecting in his calm eyes. He wasn't researching Garrick, he was researching the past. He looked for obituaries from 20, 30 years ago. Sudden, unexplained deaths of powerful men, heart attacks, strokes, drownings, freak accidents. He was refreshing his memory, studying the patterns of his own past work, reminding himself of the artistry required. He was also looking for any mention of the symbol, the closed eye. He found two. A piece in a European tabloid from 1987, linking it to the unexplained death of an East German Stasi official. A footnote in a true crime magazine from the 90s, calling it the Mark of Nemesis, a myth among intelligence circles. Satisfied, he erased his search history with a simple command line input on the library's aging computer, a skill that hadn't rusted. His nights were for observation. Using the blueprints and schedules from his contact, he mapped the routines of Garrick's inner circle. He didn't just watch his targets. He watched their guards, their drivers, their lovers, their habits. He noted the security guard at Garrick's downtown corporate front who always stepped outside for a cigarette at 10:15 p.m., leaving a blind spot in the camera coverage for 90 seconds. He noted the florist who delivered orchids to Garrick's mistress every Tuesday and the specific van she used. He noted the brand of bottled water stocked in Victor Krauss's gym bag. He was reconstructing a web, and he planned to pluck every strand until the center was exposed and helpless. His next target was logistics. A man named Eugene Halloran. Gene was a former long-haul trucker who now orchestrated Garrick's complex distribution network. He was a bear of a man, ruddy-faced and loud, who believed his size and bluster were protection enough. He had a weakness. He loved his vintage motorcycle, a meticulously restored American cruiser. He rode it every Sunday morning, rain or shine, on a winding coastal road to clear his head. Leo was on that road before dawn on a Sunday. He wore the high-visibility vest and helmet of a road maintenance worker. He parked a borrowed, beat-up pickup truck with a flashing amber light on a strategic bend. The guardrail was already slightly damaged there. He'd seen to that a few nights prior. He placed orange cones, creating a narrow channel for vehicles to pass. When Gene's deep-throated motorcycle came around the bend, Leo was ostensibly inspecting the guardrail with a clipboard. Gene slowed, annoyed. As the bike passed, Leo, with a movement that looked like a stumble against his truck, knocked a specially prepared gallon jug from the truck bed. It shattered on the road, spraying its contents, a mix of engine oil and a super-adhesive polymer, directly into the bike's path. Gene cursed, but it was too late. His front tire hit the slick. The polymer acted like glue, seizing the tire and handlebars. The massive bike went down, sliding with a shriek of metal. Gene, in his leathers and helmet, was thrown clear, over the compromised guardrail and down the steep, rocky cliff towards the churning sea below. Leo heard the crash, the silence, then the distant, final impact. He calmly picked up the largest pieces of the broken jug, got in his truck, and drove away, turning off the amber light once he was around the next bend. By the time another motorist found the wrecked bike an hour later, there was no sign of the maintenance worker, and Gene Halloran was gone, presumed drowned in a tragic single-vehicle accident. In Gene's lavish apartment, found during the police's subsequent inventory of his effects, was an oddity. Taped to the underside of his prized motorcycle helmet, which he'd left behind that morning, was a small, laminated card. On it was the now familiar closed eye with a teardrop. This time, however, a single word was written beneath it in precise block letters: network. The message was becoming a conversation. Krause, holding the card in an evidence baggie delivered by his police contact, felt the walls of his world tightening. This wasn't random. This was systematic dismantling. Finch, the money. Marco, the public face. Halloran, the distribution. Someone was surgically removing Garrick's vital organs. Krause assembled his most trusted men, a squad of 6 hardened veterans like himself. He's an old man, Krause told them, his voice cold. But he's not just an old man. He's using misdirection, poison, sabotage. He's avoiding direct confrontation. He studies patterns. So, we break the patterns. We become unpredictable. And we find what he wants most: those kids. Chapter 10. Into the Concrete Jungle. Leo's primary mission, the beacon in his darkness, remained Maya and Ben. The trail from the tenement had gone cold, but the urban jungle had its own ways of hiding secrets. He shifted his approach. If the children had been taken by low-level operatives who then vanished, they might have been passed on, or they might be hidden in plain sight among the city's countless lost souls. He began to frequent places where children might be invisible. The massive central bus station, where runaways gathered. The outskirts of the foster care system, talking to weary social workers and diners, presenting himself as a concerned retired teacher looking for 2 missing nieces. He showed them the school photo he carried in his pocket, the one of Maya and Ben beaming in front of a sunflower. The social workers were sympathetic but helpless. The system was overrun. He also visited the darker places. The unlicensed shelters, the sweatshops in the industrial district. He moved through these realms not as a venging angel, but as a fellow specter, buying information with cash or favors. He fixed a broken lock for a shelter manager, who then mentioned 2 new kids, quiet and scared, who'd been brought in by a social worker no one had seen before, only to be collected by a different man a day later. The description of the children was vague, but the timing was right. The trail led him to a neighborhood known as the Brickyard, a maze of repurposed industrial lofts and crumbling warehouses. It was a haven for artists, squatters, and black market enterprises. Here, Leo adopted a new persona. He became a scrap collector, pushing a shopping cart filled with metal bits and pieces. It gave him a reason to be anywhere, to look at anything. Days turned into weeks. The silence from his contact on the satellite phone was deafening. The systematic elimination of Garrick's men continued, a silent pressure cooker, but the lack of a solid lead on the children was an agony that dwarfed all physical pain. Then, a break. Not from the underworld, but from the light. He was observing a small, gritty playground in the Brickyard, a patch of dirt with a rusted swing set. A church group was running a makeshift soup kitchen. His eyes, scanning the ragged line of people, froze. There, holding a paper cup of soup, was a little boy. He was filthy, his hair matted, clothes too big. But the slope of his shoulders, the way he held his head slightly to the side as he blew on the hot liquid, it was Ben. Leo's heart, the frozen engine, roared to life with a violence that made his vision swim. He took an involuntary step forward, then stopped. Observe. Confirm. He scanned the area. No sign of Maya. No sign of a minder. The boy was alone. As Leo watched, Ben finished his soup, placed the cup carefully in a trash can, and shuffled away from the group, not towards the street, but into a narrow alley between 2 loft buildings. Leo followed, discarding the shopping cart, moving with a predator's grace. The alley led to a rear courtyard cluttered with broken furniture and overgrown weeds. There was a basement door, slightly ajar. Ben slipped inside. Leo approached the door. He could hear faint voices from within. A woman's voice, tired and strained. And a smaller voice. A girl's voice. Maya. He peered through the crack. In the dim light of a single bare bulb, he saw a shocking sight. The basement was damp and bare. Ben stood just inside, facing a woman in her 30s, with a gaunt, kind face and tired eyes. She was handing him a threadbare blanket. And behind her, on a stained mattress, sat Maya. She was drawing on a piece of cardboard with a stub of charcoal. She looked older, her eyes huge and solemn in her thin face, but it was her. They were alive. The woman looked up, and her eyes met Leo's through the crack. They widened in fear. She immediately stepped in front of the children. Leo pushed the door open slowly, his hands raised, palms out. "I mean no harm," he said, his voice rough with disuse and emotion. "My name is Leo. I am their grandfather." The woman, whose name was Sarah, had been a social worker before burnout and debt consumed her.
She lived in this squat.
She explained, her voice trembling, how she'd found Ben wandering the streets near the bus station over a month ago, dehydrated and in shock.
He wouldn't speak. She took him in.
A week later, while looking for food, she'd seen a man trying to drag a resistant Maya into a van near the old tenement district. Sarah had caused a distraction, screaming about police, and in the confusion, Maya had broken free and run. Sarah had found her hiding in a dumpster and brought her here. The man had been one of the two, crank or wily. She wasn't sure. He'd been desperate, talking about a deal gone sour and needing the merchandise. "They were going to sell us," Maya said quietly, not looking up from her drawing. Her voice was a ghost of its former self. Ben wouldn't talk after what he saw. "I told him to be quiet, to be invisible." Leo knelt, his old bones protesting. He was within arm's reach of his grandchildren. The smell of unwashed children and damp concrete filled his nostrils, a perfume more precious than any other. "You were so brave," he whispered, his voice breaking. So brave." Ben looked at him. There was no recognition, only a deep, hollow void. Maya's gaze lifted. She studied his face, the lines, the eyes. A flicker of memory, of safety, of porch swings and star stories, sparked in her own. A single tear traced a clean path through the grime on her cheek. "Granddad," she breathed. The word shattered him and rebuilt him in an instant. He nodded, unable to speak. Sarah watched, tears in her own eyes. "They said their dad was a policeman. That bad men hurt him and their mom. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to go to the real police. The men who were looking for them sounded like they were the police." "You saved them," Leo said, looking at her with an intensity that was both gratitude and assessment. "You have given me everything." He knew they couldn't stay. The basement was a dead end. Krause's men were searching. It was only a matter of time. He had to move them, now, to a place of true safety. But he also couldn't lead a trail to them. "Sarah, I need your help for one more night," he said, his mind racing, plans forming with lightning speed. "I need supplies. Food, water, new clothes for them. Can you get them?" Discreetly. He pressed a thick roll of cash into her hand. "Then, I need you to forget you ever saw us." Chapter 11. A flicker in the system. The girl. That night, in the dank basement, Leo allowed himself a moment of pure, human connection. He held his grandchildren. Ben, still locked in silence, leaned against him, his small body trembling. Maya cried quietly into his sweater, releasing months of terror. He told them they were safe now, that he was here, and that he would never let anything happen to them again. He did not speak of revenge. He spoke of going home one day, to the farm. But first they had to vanish. Using Sarah's purchase supplies, he cleaned them up as best he could. He cut and dyed Maya's hair a mousy brown. He put Ben in a beanie that covered his distinctive hair. He transformed them from the recognizable Miller children into two anonymous, tired kids. His safe network was gone, but his old skills provided an alternative. He remembered a place from his early days, a convent of the Sisters of Mercy on the industrial city's far southern edge. It was isolated, run by an elderly mother superior who believed in sanctuary above all else. He had, in a different life, done a service for the church there, eliminating a predator who was threatening the sisters. A debt was owed, not in money, but in silence. Before dawn, with Sarah's tearful farewell, he took the children. He used a complex route of delivery vans, whose drivers he paid handsomely in cash for short, undocumented rides, subway lines, and long walks through service tunnels. He was a ghost moving two smaller ghosts through the city's circulatory system. By midday, they stood before the heavy oak door of the convent. Leo rang the bell. A small grate slid open. Wizened eyes peered out. "I seek sanctuary for these lambs," Leo said, using an old, coded phrase. "The wolf is at the city gate." The grate closed. A long minute passed. Then, the door swung open. Mother Superior Agnes, a woman as old as Leo but with a face like weathered parchment and eyes of fiery intelligence, stood there. She looked at the ragged children, then at Leo. Her gaze lingered on his eyes. She saw not a grandfather, but the shadow of something else. "The wolf has many teeth," she said, the countersign. "And the shepherd has a steady hand," Leo replied, completing the ritual. She nodded, stepping aside. "The lambs may stay. The shepherd has other work." Leo knelt before Maya and Ben. "You will be safe here. These are good people. Do as Sister Agnes says. I will come back for you. I promise." Maya clung to him. "Don't go." "I must," he said softly, brushing her cheek. "To make sure the wolf can never find you again. Be brave, my stargazer. Watch over your brother." With a final, painful wrench, he stood, nodded to Mother Agnes, and turned away. He walked back into the city, his heart a lead weight, but his purpose now diamond-hard and clear. His grandchildren were safe. The last tether to his old, gentle self was secured. Now, Naraka could work without restraint. Chapter 12. A Trail of Coincidental Deaths. With the children safe, Leo's campaign shifted. It became faster, more aggressive, a direct assault on Garrick's sense of security. He was no longer just dismantling the organization, he was terrorizing it. He targeted the head of security at Garrick's downtown tower. The man was a health nut, drinking a custom protein shake every afternoon. Leo, posing as a deliver man for the upscale health food store, swapped the man's usual shake for one laced with a powerful, fast-acting endocrine disruptor. The man died of a sudden, catastrophic cardiac arrest in his gym that evening. He targeted Garrick's personal lawyer. The man had a habit of using a private steam room at his club. Leo introduced a specialized aerosol into the steam generator, a compound that, when inhaled in the hot, moist air, caused immediate and massive pulmonary edema. The lawyer was found drowned in his own fluids. Each death was a masterpiece of misdirection. A heart attack, a tragic health incident, a terrible accident, and at each scene the symbol, sometimes etched into a piece of furniture, sometimes on a note in the victim's pocket.
Security. Law.
Panic, previously a contained whisper among Krause's inner circle, now rippled through Garrick's entire empire. No one felt safe. Bodyguards quit. Associates went to ground. The machine was seizing up, not from external pressure, but from an internal, chilling fear. The rumor of Naraka was now gospel. They spoke of him in hushed tones, a ghost, a plague, the judgment of God. Garrick, holed up in his fortress-like country estate, surrounded by Krause and a dozen of the best mercenaries money could buy, was unraveling. His arrogance had curdled into paranoia. He fired guns at shadows. He accused his own men of betrayal. He was drinking heavily. "He's picking us off one by one," Garrick raged at Krause. "He's in the walls. How is he doing this?" Krause was calm, but his mind was a battlefield. The old man was good. Better than good. He was using their own patterns, their own weaknesses, against them. The only pattern Krause could discern was the target selection, support systems. He was isolating Garrick. He's drawing us out, Kraus said, making us react. We need to think like him. He's old school, meticulous. He'll have a final objective. You. Then use the bait, Garrick screamed. You said the kids were the bait. Find them. Use them. We're trying, Kraus said coldly. Every contact, every snitch, every dirty cop on the payroll is looking. They've vanished. He has them, or he's hidden them so deep we'll never find them in time. An idea was forming in Kraus's tactical mind. If they couldn't find the children, they had to make the hunter come to them. They had to create an irresistible target. Not Garrick and his fortress. That was what Naraka expected. Something else. Something that would strike at the heart of the legend's new weakness. Kraus began his own research. He dug into David Miller's life, his father's history, the farm, the quiet life. He found the police report from when Leo went missing, the forced footlocker, the patch with the symbol. He had a forensic accountant look at Leo Miller's finances. They were simple, except for a single, long-standing property tax payment for a remote parcel of land in the national forest, under a different name. A cabin, a bolt hole, a place from the past. Kraus didn't think the children were there. It was too obvious, too remote for kids. But it was a piece of the ghost. A place he might return to. A place he might care about. We can't draw him out, Kraus told Garrick, a grim plan solidifying. So we burn down his forest. We hit the farm. We hit the cabin. We destroy every remnant of the life he left behind. We show him there is no past to return to. We make it personal on our terms. The rage will make him sloppy. The rage will bring him into the open. Garrick, drowning in fear, seized on the plan. Do it. Burn it all. Salt the earth. Then he'll have nothing left to protect. He'll come straight for me, and you'll be waiting. Chapter 13. The Boy in the Iron Cage. Leo's next move was against Garrick's source, a reclusive chemist named Albin, who manufactured the unique, high-purity narcotics that were Garrick's flagship product. Albin worked from a state-of-the-art lab built into a renovated fallout shelter beneath a seemingly ordinary suburban house. His security was technological: pressure plates, gas lines, biometric locks. This required a different approach. Leo couldn't get close physically, so he didn't try. He studied the neighborhood. The house received its power from the main grid, but also had a dedicated backup generator for the lab's sensitive environment. The generator ran on propane, stored in a large tank in the backyard. Using a child's high-powered slingshot and ceramic ball bearings from a distance, Leo shattered the external temperature sensor on the propane tank one night. The tank's internal safety valve was designed to release pressure if the temperature rose too high, preventing an explosion. By disabling the sensor, he tricked the tank's emergency system into believing it was overheating. The next afternoon, under the warm spring sun, the tank's safety valve activated. A silent, invisible cloud of odorized propane began to vent into the confined backyard. It seeped towards the house, finding its way into the basement air intake for the backup generator. At 3:07 p.m., the neighborhood experienced a brief, planned power flicker from the grid. As designed, Albin's lab systems switched to backup power. The generator in the basement kicked on. The spark from the generator's ignition met the propane-rich air. The explosion was not nuclear, but it was devastating. It lifted the suburban house off its foundations and turned it into a fireball. The underground lab collapsed. Albin and everything in it were vaporized. The official cause was a catastrophic malfunction of the home's propane systems. In the wreckage, firefighters found a single, bizarre artifact. A piece of the laboratory's shattered blast door, hurled 50 yards into a neighbor's pool. Etched into the metal, as if by the force of the explosion itself, was the stark outline of a closed eye. The word beneath it was simple: source. The city was now in a quiet uproar. The police, the media, even rival gangs, were whispering. Garrick's empire was under attack by a force that defied understanding. The body count was rising, all from accidents, yet the pattern was undeniable. Leo, returning to his boarding house room after the Albin operation, felt no triumph. Only a steady, cold progression towards his final goal: Victor Krauss, and then Michael Garrick himself. He was preparing for the final phase when his satellite phone, silent for so long, buzzed. It was his contact. The voice was tense. Naraka, your work is noticeable. I have two pieces of information. First, Krauss has stopped looking for the children in the city. He is looking at your past. The farm. The cabin in the woods. Leo's blood went cold. They wouldn't find the children at the convent. It was unrelated to his past. But the farm, David's home, Clara's garden, the porch swing. The thought of those men defiling that sacred ground with their presence ignited a new, white-hot fury. Second, the contact continued. They have a prisoner. Not yours. A competitor. A man named Dragan.
Serbian.
He was trying to move in on Garrick's territory. Krauss captured him a week ago. He's being held and interrogated at a private facility, an old water treatment plant on the West River, near the docks. Krauss is there personally, trying to extract information before disposing of him. It's a fortress, but a known one. If you want to strike at Krauss directly while he's distracted, that is your window. But it is a trap waiting to be sprung. They are on high alert. Leo considered. The farm was an emotional target, but not tactical. The cabin was empty. The children were safe. Krauss, however, was the brain, the operational commander. Removing him would leave Garrick a blind, panicking animal. And a prison break, the liberation of another of Garrick's enemies, would sow even more chaos and fear. Send me the schematics of the water plant, Leo said. Chapter 14, The Power Behind the Throne, the Kalidasa Syndicate. The West River treatment plant was a decaying monument to industrial decay, a labyrinth of rusted catwalks, silent filtration pools, and echoing concrete chambers. According to the schematics, Dragan was being held in the old control room on the upper level, accessible by a single, heavily guarded staircase. Krauss had a squad of 8 men. 4 on perimeter, 2 at the base of the stairs, 2 with him in the control room. It was a classic, defensible position. They were expecting, perhaps hoping for, an assault. They were armed with assault rifles, body armor, flashbangs. Leo did not bring a rifle. He brought the silence. He approached from the riverside, swimming through the icy, polluted water in a black wetsuit, his satchel sealed in a waterproof bag. He emerged beneath a loading platform, a ghost rising from the deep. He used magnetic climbing gear, silent and slow, to scale the sheer concrete wall to a service hatch 40 feet up, bypassing the entire ground-level perimeter. Inside, he was in the belly of the beast. The air was thick with the smell of rust and damp. He moved through the infrastructure, using the thunderous noise of a few remaining, malfunctioning pumps to mask his movements. He located the 2 men at the base of the stairs. They were alert, scanning the darkness with night vision goggles. Leo climbed into the overhead ductwork above them. From his pouch, he took 2 small, glass ampoules. He dropped them simultaneously. They shattered on the concrete floor at the men's feet, releasing not poison, but a concentrated, instant-acting sedative in aerosol form. The men inhaled, coughed once, and slumped to the floor, unconscious. He lowered himself down, secured them with plastic ties, and took their radios. He proceeded up the stairs, not as an attacker, but as a part of the structure. At the top, the control room had a thick metal door with a reinforced glass window, blacked out. He could hear voices inside. Krauss's calm, cold tone, and another voice, thick with a Slavic accent, snarling in pain. Leo didn't try the door. He looked at the ceiling. Above the control room was a crawl space for electrical conduits. He found the access panel further down the corridor. He slid inside, a tight, dusty space. He positioned himself directly above, where the voices were loudest. Through a gap in the paneling, he looked down. Victor Krauss stood, imposing in tactical gear, over a man tied to a chair. Dragan was bloody, bruised, but defiant. The 2 other guards stood by the door. "Your network in the east," Krauss said, his voice like ground glass. "Give me the names, and your death will be quick." "Go to hell," Dragan spat. Krauss nodded to one guard, who stepped forward with a pair of bolt cutters. Leo had seen enough. He had two objectives: eliminate Kraus and free Dragon to cause chaos. He prepared a different tool. A small, spring-loaded dart gun. Its projectiles tipped with a neurotoxin that caused immediate, total motor neuron failure, a chemical guillotine for the nervous system. He aimed through the gap, his breathing still. He fired twice in rapid succession.
Thwip, thwip.
The guard with the bolt cutters dropped, the tool clattering. The other guard by the door gasped, clawing at his neck, then collapsed. Kraus reacted with lightning speed, diving for cover behind a console, his gun drawn, his eyes scanning the room's corners. He hadn't seen the darts. He didn't know where the attack came from. Naraka, Kraus shouted, his calm finally cracking. Show yourself. Face me. Leo remained silent.
He watched.
He dropped a small smoke canister from the crawlspace, filling the room with a gray, acrid haze. In the confusion, Dragon, seizing his chance, managed to rock his chair, toppling it and scrambling towards a dead guard's weapon. Kraus, blind in the smoke, fired towards the noise. Leo dropped from the ceiling, landing silently behind Kraus. The man sensed him, whirling with preternatural speed. Their eyes met in the swirling gray. Kraus saw an old man, wet, dressed in black, with eyes that held the absolute zero of deep space. Kraus fired. Leo was already moving, not away, but inside the man's guard. He deflected the gun arm with one hand, and with the other, pressed a single, needle-like tool against Kraus's neck, just below the ear. It was not a killing blow. It was an injection. Kraus felt a cold burn. His muscles locked. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. He stood, paralyzed, his eyes wide with terror and understanding. This was how it happened. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. Leo took his gun, looked at the struggling Dragon, who had gotten a weapon and was staring at him. The east door is clear, Leo said, his voice devoid of inflection. Tell your people Kraus is dead. Tell them Garrick is next. Dragon, a hardened killer himself, felt a chill at the presence of this ghost. He nodded, then fled into the smoke. Leo looked back at Kraus, a statue of fear. He leaned close. You killed my son, he whispered, the only emotion a faint, arctic ripple. You took my peace. Now, you will watch your world end before you die. He left Kraus there, paralyzed but conscious, and vanished back into the crawlspace. By the time Dragon's escape triggered the outer perimeter alarm, Leo was back in the river, swimming away. Behind him, the plant was in chaos. And Victor Kraus, the mighty enforcer, was trapped in the ultimate prison of his own body, waiting for the end he now knew was inevitable. The power behind the throne had been toppled. Now, only the king remained. And Naraka was coming for the crown. Part 4. When Death Walks Again. Chapter 15. Gathering the Lost Pieces. The city's chaos was a distant murmur to Leo as he emerged from the river, a specter returning to solid ground. He shed the wetsuit in a shadowed alcove, dressed in his dark clothes, and vanished into the pre-dawn gloom. His body ached with a cold that had nothing to do with the water, but his mind was a scalpel, sharp and single-minded. He allowed himself one detour. From a payphone in a desolate part of the docks, he called the convent. Mother Agnes answered, her voice alert even at this hour. The lambs, he asked, no greeting necessary.
Sleeping.
The girl had a nightmare. She called for her grandfather. The boy still does not speak, but he ate today. A pause. The wolf's howls grow louder in the news. The wolf has lost its teeth. Soon it will lose its head. Keep them safe a little longer. They are safe in the fold, but a shepherd should not be alone in the dark for too long. It changes a man. The man was changed in the light, Leo said, his voice hollow. The dark just gave him work to do. He hung up. The call was a risk, but necessary. The confirmation of their safety was the fuel for the final sprint. He found a new flophouse, even more anonymous than the last, and slept for 4 dreamless hours. When he awoke, he was pure purpose. He accessed a secure drop from his contact. The files contained the final piece, the complete schematics and security protocols for Garrick's country estate, codenamed Elysium. It was a fortress. Motion sensors, thermal cameras, pressure grids in the lawn, a dedicated security bunker with a 6-man team monitoring feeds 24/7. Armed patrols. Bulletproof glass. A panic room. A direct assault would be suicide, even for him. But Naraka had never conducted a direct assault in his life. He studied the files. He found the flaw, not in the technology, but in the man. Garrick's paranoia had a pattern. He trusted no one, but he demanded certain comforts. One was food. He employed a private chef, but all ingredients were vetted by a security detail upon delivery. The delivery was made every other day by a specific, high-end gourmet grocer, Epicurean Delights, in a refrigerated van. Another comfort was his health. Terrified of the invisible poisons he now knew were real, Garrick had hired a private doctor for weekly checkups. The doctor, a corrupt but skilled man named Phillips, arrived every Thursday at 10 a.m. Leo saw the confluence, the human element, the routine. He spent a day observing the Epicurean Delights delivery. The van, the driver, the route, the 2 guards who met it at the estate's outer gate, the meticulous unloading and scanning procedure. He noted the driver's cigarette break before entering the estate grounds, leaning against the van in a specific spot. The next day was Wednesday. Leo's final preparations were not of weaponry, but of identity. From his satchel, he produced the materials for his most delicate disguise yet. Using pigments, latex, and a profound understanding of facial anatomy, he began to sculpt a new face over his own in the dim room. He aged himself further, softened his jawline, added the specific lines of a life of privileged service rather than hidden violence. He became Dr. Felix Phillips. He studied video clips of the doctor's mannerisms, his slightly officious gait, the way he held his medical bag. He practiced the signature until it was flawless. He prepared a medical bag identical to Phillips's, stocked with legitimate equipment, and one special edition, a vial of clear liquid labeled vitamin B12 complex. On Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m., the real Dr. Phillips left his uptown apartment. As he walked to his car, a city sanitation truck momentarily blocked the alley. An old homeless man stumbled into him, mumbling an apology, steadying himself on the doctor's arm. Phillips, irritated, brushed him off. He didn't feel the tiny, needle-like prick on his neck. 20 minutes later, while driving, he was overcome by a sudden, overwhelming wave of nausea and dizziness. He pulled over, vomiting onto the curb. A concerned passerby called an ambulance. Dr. Phillips would spend the day in the hospital undergoing tests for a sudden, severe vertigo attack. At 9:55 a.m., Dr. Phillips, in a perfectly tailored suit and carrying his bag, pulled up to the outer gate of Elysium in a car matching the doctor's. The guard checked the ID, scanned the face against the provided photo. Leo's disguise, coupled with the guard's expectation, passed muster. He was waved through. The inner sanctum awaited. Chapter 16. The Old Ghost and the Heirs. The estate was a sprawling, modern monstrosity of glass and steel, meant to impress and intimidate. Leo parked where the doctor usually parked. He was met at the door by one of Krause's remaining lieutenants, a sharp-eyed man called Walsh. Walsh patted him down, examined the medical bag, his eyes lingering on the instruments. "Routine check, Doc," Walsh said, his tone devoid of respect. "The boss is jumpy." "Given the circumstances, understandable," Leo said, perfectly mimicking Phillips's slightly pompous, slightly nervous diction. He was led through opulent, empty rooms to Garrick's private study. The man was a wreck of his former self. He paced before the floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of amber liquor in his hand, his eyes darting to every shadow. The news of the water plant disaster, Krause found paralyzed, Dragan escaped, had reached him. His empire was in freefall. "Phillips. About time. I feel like my heart is going to explode. Check it.
Now."
"Of course, Mr. Garrick. Please sit." As Garrick sat in a leather chair, Leo went through the motions. Blood pressure cuff, stethoscope. He made concerned noises. Elevated, Very elevated. Your stress levels are dangerously high. I have a new supplement from Switzerland, a powerful anti-anxiety and cardiovascular stabilizer. It must be administered intramuscularly for immediate effect. Garrick's eyes narrowed. You're sure? Tested. On myself, just this morning. Leo lied smoothly. The clarity is remarkable. He drew the vitamin B12 into a syringe, making sure Garrick saw the unbroken seal on the vial. Greed and fear warred in Garrick. The promise of relief won. He rolled up his sleeve. Do it. Leo administered the injection. The substance was, in fact, a sophisticated cocktail of his own design, a fast-acting sedative to induce calm, mixed with a truth serum derivative and a trace of a compound that would, over the next hour, slowly induce arrhythmia. You should feel a sense of calm within minutes, Leo said, repacking his bag. And Garrick did. The constant, gnawing fear began to recede, replaced by a woolly detachment. Good, Phillips. That's better. I must check on your security detail, Leo said, his voice a gentle, commanding hum. Extreme stress is contagious. For your own protection, I should assess them. Ensure no one is on the brink of a breakdown that could compromise you. In his drugged, placid state, Garrick waved a hand. Walsh, take the doc to the bunker. Let him check the men. Walsh, wary but unwilling to contradict his boss in this state, led Leo down a back staircase to the basement security hub. It was a room of glowing screens, showing every angle of the estate. For men were on duty. Gentlemen, Leo said, setting his bag down. Mr. Garrick is concerned for your welfare. The stress of the situation. I'm to give you each a quick checkup. A preventative measure. The men exchanged glances, annoyed but compliant. One by one, Leo had them sit. He took their blood pressure, listened to their hearts. With each, he offered a vitamin shot for immunity. The syringe's contents were different this time, a potent, fast-acting neuromuscular blocker. As the last man received his injection, the first one slumped forward onto his console. Then the next. What the hell? Walsh reached for his gun. Leo was already moving. He wasn't the old man now. He was a blur of efficient motion. A pressure point strike to Walsh's wrist numbed his hand. The follow-up, a hardened knuckle to the throat, crushed his larynx. Walsh fell, gagging silently. Leo caught him, lowered him to the floor. He looked at the bank of screens. He located the feeds for the panic room, the main gate, the patrol routes. He isolated the security bunker's feeds, looping 5 minutes of empty, peaceful footage. Then, he systematically began disabling systems. The external motion sensors, the thermal cameras, the communication jammer that blocked all signals but their own. He picked up the security radio. In Walsh's voice, cultivated from hours of listening, he barked, "Perimeter teams, converge on the eastern fence line. Possible sensor breach. Immediate. All units." He watched on screen as the 4 roaming patrols hurried towards the distant eastern tree line, away from the main house. The fortress was now a shell. Its eyes were blind, its guards chasing phantoms. Only the king remained, drugged and alone in his glass castle. Leo picked up his medical bag and walked back upstairs. He stopped at a lavish guest bathroom, washing the disguise from his face with a special solvent. The old, familiar lines reappeared, etched deep with grief and purpose. He was Leo. He was Naraka. He was the grandfather. All converged in this moment. He entered the study. Garrick was lounging in his chair, gazing out at the grounds, a stupid smile on his face. "Phillips, the trees are so green." "They are," Leo agreed, his voice now his own, low and terrible. Garrick turned slowly. The smile faded, replaced by confusion, then dawning, drug-hampered horror. You're not." "No," Leo said, placing the medical bag on the desk. He drew out not a syringe, but the tanto, the short Japanese blade. It caught the morning light. "I am the father of the man you murdered, the grandfather of the children you tried to destroy." Garrick tried to stand, to shout, but the sedative made his limbs heavy, his voice a slur. "Guards." Walsh. They can't hear you, Leo said, taking a step closer. Your man Kraus is paralyzed, watching his world end. Your accountant is dead.
Your distributor is dead.
Your lawyer, your security chief, your chemist all gone. Not by guns, not in a war. They just stopped being. As you will. Terror finally pierced the pharmacological haze. Garrick scrambled back, knocking over his drink. Money. I have money. Millions. You can have it all. I had a farm, Leo said quietly, advancing. I had a son who laughed. A daughter-in-law who sang. Grandchildren who believed the world was good. What is your money against that? It was business. Garrick shrieked, cowering. He killed my man, and you killed mine, Leo said, now standing over him. But you didn't just kill him. You killed the peace of a valley. You killed the future in my grandchildren's eyes. For that, there is no business, only consequence. He moved then, not with a vengeful slash, but with a precise, clinical motion. The tanto flashed. Garrick felt a searing pain in his side, then a strange coldness. Leo had pierced his kidney. A wound that was not immediately fatal, but agonizing and inevitably deadly, without medical intervention. Garrick crumpled, whimpering, clutching his side as blood seeped through his fingers. Leo knelt beside him, his face close. You will die here alone, in this temple you built to your own power. It will be slow. You will have time to think about the family you destroyed, about the quiet life you thought was weakness. The police will find you, long after the panic room you never reached has ceased to matter. He stood up, wiping the blade clean on Garrick's silk shirt. He walked to the desk, took a sheet of Garrick's monogrammed stationery. With a pen, he drew the symbol one final time. The closed eye with a teardrop. Beneath it, he wrote, Justice. He placed it on Garrick's chest. Without a backward glance, he walked out of the study, out of the silent house, and across the disarmed lawn. He vanished into the woods beyond the estate, just as the first of the confused perimeter guards began to radio the silent bunker for new orders. Chapter 17. Storming the Modern Fortress. The storm, when it broke publicly, was a media tsunami. Michael Garrick, feared crime lord, found dead in his mansion from a single, mysterious wound. His entire security detail found incapacitated or dead from untraceable causes. His empire in tatters, his lieutenants either dead or fleeing. It was the crime story of the decade, a labyrinth with no clear culprit. The police found the symbol, the weeping eye. Forensics found traces of exotic compounds, strange delivery methods. The whispers among federal agents and intelligence circles became a roar. Naraka. The legend was not only real, he had just executed the most stunning solo decapitation of a criminal organization in modern history. Captain Reed, sitting in his office in Oak Haven surrounded by files, stared at the crime scene photos from the estate. He saw the symbol. He remembered the patch from Leo's trunk. He remembered the old man's words. Tell him the law will not find what is lost now. A cold awe settled over him. He had pitted Leo as a broken old man. He had been wrong. He had been dealing with a force of nature, a silent tsunami that had receded as mysteriously as it had struck. He quietly closed the Miller case file, marking it unsolved, perpetrator deceased. Some truths were too dangerous to pursue. For Leo, there was no victory, only completion. He returned to the city, to the convent. Mother Agnes met him at the door. She saw the exhaustion in his soul, the bloodless finality in his eyes. The wolf is dead, he said. She nodded, stepping aside. The lambs are in the garden. He found them there, in a small, walled courtyard where late spring flowers struggled through the city grime. Maya was reading a picture book to Ben, who was stacking smooth stones. They looked cleaner, less haunted, but the scars were deep. They looked up as he approached. Maya's eyes filled with immediate, wary tears. Ben stared, unblinking. Leo knelt, his joints screaming, the weight of every year and every death crashing down on him. He was just an old man again, tired and shattered. It's over, he whispered, his voice cracking. The The bad men, they can't hurt anyone ever again. Maya launched herself into his arms, sobbing, deep, healing sobs of release. Ben, after a long moment, slowly stood and walked over. He didn't hug, but he leaned his small body against Leo's side, his head resting on his grandfather's arm. It was enough. Leo held them, tears finally carving hot paths through the grime on his own face. He wept for David, for Clara, for the peace he had lost, for the monster he had been forced to become again. He wept for the grandchildren who had seen hell. But in the warmth of their small bodies, he felt a fragile, green shoot of something new, a future. Chapter 18: The Art of Invisible Justice. The weeks that followed were a delicate reconstruction. They could not return to the farm immediately. It was still a crime scene, and too many questions lingered. Leo used the last of his old resources to secure a small, quiet cottage in a remote coastal village under a new, clean identity he had kept in reserve for a true retirement. Here, the slow work of healing began. Ben did not speak, but he began to communicate, through drawings, through gestures, by taking Leo's hand. Maya talked, sometimes in torrents about the horrible memories, sometimes in whispers about her parents. Leo listened to it all, a steady, patient presence. He told them stories. Not fairy tales, but true stories of their father's childhood, of their mother's kindness, of the silly things they did. He rebuilt their parents for them as people, not as victims. He never spoke of what he had done. To them, he was just Granddad, who made terrible pancakes but gave the best hugs, who could fix any broken toy and knew the name of every bird. One evening, as they walked on the beach, Maya asked, "Granddad, how did you make the bad men go away?" He looked out at the endless, cleansing sea. "The world has a way of balancing itself, Maya. Sometimes, when the law is asleep, other things have to wake up." Was it scary? Yes, he said honestly, but not as scary as the thought of losing you. She slipped her hand into his. "I'm glad you found us." He squeezed her hand. "So am I, stargazer. So am I." Meanwhile, in a private, high-care neurological facility, Victor Krause's body remained a prison. He was conscious, fed through tubes, breathing with assistance. He could see the news on the TV in his room. He saw the collapse of Garrick's empire, the official theories, the utter failure of anyone to name Naraka. He saw the legend become a ghost story once more. One afternoon, a new orderly came to turn him. The man was old, with kind eyes.
He didn't speak.
As he efficiently adjusted Krause's limbs, he leaned close and whispered, so only Krause could hear. "He says to tell you it's done. The debt is paid. Now, you live with the silence." It was the only visitor Naraka ever paid. The final, merciful cruelty. Krause was left with the truth and the absolute, impotent knowledge of it. True justice, Leo believed, was not always death. Sometimes, it was being forced to witness the world continuing without you. Chapter 19. The Mastermind's Fear. Autumn came, painting the valley in fiery hues. The police tape was long gone from the Miller farm. The official investigations had moved on. The world had new tragedies to consume. One cool October morning, an old pickup truck crunched up the gravel driveway. Leo, Maya, and Ben got out. The house stood silent, a little more weathered. The garden was overgrown. The porch swing was motionless. For a long time, they just stood there holding hands. The memories here were a mix of radiant joy and bottomless pain. "It's okay to be sad," Leo said. "And it's okay to be happy to be home. Both can be true." They went inside. They cleaned not with frenzy, but with ritual. Maya cleaned her room, putting her old things away, making space for the new person she had become. Ben followed Leo everywhere, a silent shadow, handing him tools as he fixed a leaky faucet, rehung the porch swing. They visited the graves in town. Leo brought wildflowers. Maya laid a drawing she'd made of the family on a picnic. Ben placed a perfectly smooth stone he'd carried from the beach on each headstone. "We're okay, Dad," Maya whispered. "Granddad is taking care of us." Leo put a hand on each of their shoulders. He'd be so proud of you. Both of you. That night, they lit a fire in the old hearth for the first time. The flames danced, pushing back the ghosts. They ate soup at the kitchen table. It was quiet, but it was no longer the silence of absence. It was the quiet of healing, of a family learning to breathe again. Leo sat on the porch swing later, a blanket over his knees. Maya came out and sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. Ben followed, sitting on the porch step, looking up at the stars beginning to prick through the velvet sky. "Tell us the story of the bear in the sky, Granddad," Maya said. And so he did. His voice, rough but warm, wove the old tale under the infinite, watchful stars. The valley listened, the mountains hunching protectively around them. The rhythm of the seasons was broken, yes, but a new rhythm was slowly being found, a slower, more precious beat, measured in shared sunrises, in a child's tentative smile, in the gradual return of peace. Chapter 20. A New Promise in Old Soil. Winter sealed the valley in a blanket of white, a clean slate. Leo taught Ben how to track rabbits in the snow, the boy's silent concentration a form of language. He helped Maya with her schoolwork by correspondence, her quick mind eager to re-engage with the world. One day, a plain sedan came up the drive. Captain Reed got out, alone. He looked older. He stood awkwardly as Leo came out onto the porch.
Leo.
"Captain, can I come in?" Leo nodded, holding the door open. Reed sat at the kitchen table, accepting a cup of coffee. He looked at the children, who regarded him solemnly from the doorway to the living room. "They look well. They are healing. I'm glad." Reed took a deep breath. "I'm not here officially. The Garrett case, it's a maze. It'll never be solved. Too many loose ends, too many impossible things." He met Leo's gaze. "I think I understand some of those impossible things now. I won't pretend to know how. And I don't want to." Leo sipped his coffee, his Winterlake eyes calm. "Some stories are best left untold." "Agreed." Reed put a file on the table. "This is everything we had on David's investigation on the hit. And the subsequent events. I'm retiring next month. This file disappears when I go."
Consider it my respect.
"For David. And for you." It was an offering and an acknowledgement. Leo gave a slow nod. "Thank you, Captain." Reed left soon after. Leo burned the file in the fireplace, watching the past turn to ash and smoke. Spring returned, gentle and green. Leo took the children out to the back field, near the old oak tree. He had 3 small saplings, a dogwood, a sugar maple, and a white pine. "This one is for your dad," he said, planting the sturdy maple. "Strong and true." "This one is for your mom," he said, planting the flowering dogwood. "Kind and beautiful." "And this one," he said, planting the pine between them, "is for us. To grow tall together, and to always remember." They watered the trees. As they worked, Ben, his hands covered in dark soil, looked up at Leo. He opened his mouth. His voice was a rusty and used instrument, but the word was clear. "Home." Leo felt the word pierce him with a joy so profound it was almost pain. He looked at Ben, then at Maya, who was smiling through her tears. "Yes, Ben," he said, his own voice thick. "Home." That night, Leo went to the attic one last time. He took the tools, the chisels, the needles, the flute, the tonto. He carried them out to the far corner of the property, to a place where the creek dug deep. One by one, he buried them, returning them to the earth, sealing away Naraka forever. He kept only the satellite phone. He powered it on, sent one final, prearranged signal, a digital obituary for the legend, then crushed it under a rock and buried it too. He walked back to the house, where lamplight glowed golden in the windows. He could see Maya setting the table. Ben was carefully carrying bowls from the kitchen. He paused on the porch, listening to the sound of the creek, the wind in the pines, the faint laughter from inside. The peaceful valley had been wounded, but it was alive. His family was broken, but they were whole in a new way. He had walked through hell and worn the face of a devil to protect heaven. He was just Leo Miller again. A grandfather. A farmer. A man who had outlived his nightmares. He took a deep breath of the clean, evening air, pushed open the door, and went inside to his family. The path of revenge was ended. The path of life, patiently, lovingly, began again.